Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest event in our So You Want to Be series, where we aim to give you an insight into different areas of practice. My name is Kerry Montgomery and I am a non-executive committee member of the Scottish Young Lawyers Association, and I am also an in-house trainee solicitor. So I was absolutely delighted when I was asked to arrange this event this evening, So You Want to Be an In-House Lawyer. I'm very pleased to introduce our panel this evening. We have Anastasia Morris, who is a trainee solicitor at the University of Glasgow, Rachel Duffy, who is a solicitor at the Scottish Social Services Council, Laura Lee, who is legal counsel at the Scotch Whisky Association, and Kevin McKee, who is head of legal services at the City of Edinburgh Council. So tonight our speakers are going to talk a little bit about their roles, and then there's going to be some time at the end for any questions. During the presentations, can I ask you to please keep your mics muted, and please feel free to pop any questions that you've got into the chat box while the presentations are going on, and we can ask these at the end. So without further ado, I am delighted to introduce our first speaker, Anastasia Morris, who is a trainee solicitor at the University of Glasgow.
Hello, hi everyone. So my name is Anastasia, or Annie, everybody calls me here. And I work in-house as a trainee solicitor at the University of Glasgow, which is based within the contracts team. So we sit in the finance office in the university, which is classed as research support. So I work within a team, it's quite a small team of about 12 people. I am now about 18 months into my traineeship, so I started last March. My main roles in the contracts team are to assist the head of legal and the other contract managers, who are the qualified solicitors within our team, to assist them within the contracts team. And this is assisting with the preparation, negotiation and finalisation of different types of commercial contract. So this for me is a one-seat traineeship purely in commercial contracts and other sort of like things to do with data protection and intellectual property and anything that falls in that sort of remit. So the types of agreements that we would normally deal with within the contracts team are things like research agreements, services agreements, material transfer agreements, non-disclosure agreements, and other contracts. We see all different types of contract, and these we negotiate with other academic institutions, and these are other universities, government bodies, commercial entities, and often individuals. So the purpose of my role is to assist the contracts team in ensuring the maximum benefit to the university, and this is done whilst appropriately managing risks and looking at intellectual property issues, and this ensures that we comply with different types of legislation that apply to the university and university policies. So being in-house, it is quite important to know and understand the way in which the university works. This includes the processes. So since starting at the university, I've realised that some universities are quite university specific and academic specific, so it is quite a niche area of law I've found since being here, and there's probably like loads of jargon that I could use that you would only understand in the university kind of setting, which I'm sure it's the same in other in-house roles. So understanding the sort of bigger picture of the university and putting things into context is very important in this role to allow me to advise my clients correctly. On top of negotiating contracts and getting them signed off, we also have to provide contractual and legal advice to academics and other members of staff. And in addition to this, we provide support for applications for contract funding, and we assist in post-award contract management. So it is quite varied. You can get anything sort of across your desk. Sometimes you get quite obscure things that you might not be able to advise on, and you might have to pass on. But yeah, there's a department in the university for everything, and you quickly learn who can help you with what. So being in-house is different because we don't have clients per se, but my client is the university. So what this means is that I have to provide advice to university employees, which includes staff and academics. So if a student approached for advice, they would not fall within that remit. So I have to be careful that we're not advising students because they are not, don't fall under that remit. So the sort of like good thing about this is that we don't have to go out and look for work. We're not going out to get business, and we don't have fee targets that we have to meet. We just fall within a part of the university, and staff are all aware of our role and our existence. So they get in touch with us when they have a contract or something that they need assistance with. So what I enjoy about working in this role is being able to work in an environment that is driven by more than just chargeable hours and fees. This is kind of how I ended up in this role. In my last job, I used to have to work to fee targets, and I found that it sort of got in the way of providing the service that I wanted to provide, and I was spending more time on that than other things that I actually enjoyed, which was kind of giving out the legal advice and doing the drafting and things. So that's kind of how I fell into this role. And being in-house allows me to become an integral part of the business and get involved in a variety of different areas of university. So what we are classed as is research support, but it's not just research support we would do. So there's often times when I'll assist with like procurement agreements and other terms and conditions for the university. For example, I was working on the terms and conditions for the short-term lets for the halls the other day, and like events and services and things like that. So there's a scope of things that you can get involved in different parts of the university. So one of the things that I like as well is that working with clients and the sort of like focus being off what you're charging them like allows you to build up a strong client relationship, because I think they just view you as a sort of equal because you're a fellow employee of theirs. And what I found is that I've built up quite a good rapport with people that I do contracts for, and they'll often approach me with repeat pieces of work, which I quite like because it builds up a good relationship. And a lot of them have said, like, when you're back on campus, do you want to go for a coffee and things like that? So it's quite nice. We have what we call PIs, which are principal investigators, who sort of work on the contracts, and a lot of us in the team have like sort of like our own PIs. Like, no one's allocated to people, but PIs have a preference of people that they like to go back to. So it's quite nice because it makes you feel like you've done a good job because someone will come back to you repeatedly. So I like that sort of element of it. So turning to the key skills I would say required to work in-house in any in-house role and in this role that I've learned is firstly effective time management skills and the ability to prioritise competing demands. So this is a very high workload job, so you're talking that you'll have hundreds of contracts going on at the same time, not like 10 or 20, which is kind of what I was expecting. But yeah, I have a spreadsheet of all my contracts and there's probably about 400 in there. So it's quite a heavy workload, and a lot of prioritisation is required for pieces of work. Certain departments have shorter timescales. If there's like an NDA that you need in the meetings tomorrow, you have to be able to like kind of move everything around for it, and things do come in very last minute that require immediate attention. So you've got to be able to effectively manage your time. The second important thing is the ability to work independently as well as part of a team. So my team is quite small. Like I said, there's about 12 of us. So it's not a huge team for the amount of work that we have, and sometimes we are very stretched. It's really very important to be able to handle your own work and kind of know, as a trainee as well, you need your support and know when there's things that you can ask certain people and things. But you've also got to make sure that you're able to pick up pieces of work from other team members, maybe when they have too much, and like you shout and say, do you know what, I can take on a little bit more. Once you've been here a while, you start to learn your capacity. When people go on holiday as well, we're often required to take on people's pieces of work, and when people leave the team, we had one of the last trainees left, and I had to take over the majority of the work. So we've got to be able to pull together as a team for that. The last kind of key one that I thought I would mention is the ability to work flexibly and adapt to changing environments. So, like I said, there are a variety of different things that we might have to advise on. So you might have to sort of delve into a different practice area and start doing a bit of research into something obscure. So you've got to be able to, like I said, it's mainly commercial contracts, but you've got to be able to be adaptable. So there are a variety of different queries that come in that relate to different parts of the university, and you have to look at them from like different perspectives. So for example, like advising procurement, we would be buying an item or providing a service, or getting someone else to provide us a service, but sometimes we're providing the service. So it's like looking at the contract from different perspectives depending on the kind of background of it. So you've got to be able to kind of wear those different hats. So I particularly enjoy this role because there is a really good work-life balance, and working in the public sector really affords itself to good holidays, for one, which I know is important to a lot of people and was important to me, particularly because I did my diploma part-time and I worked full-time, so I had no time at all. So this is kind of why I wanted to go into this area, and the working hours are really good too. So obviously the core hours are 9 to 5 like most jobs, but I know you hear some horror stories about traineeships, but I very rarely finish after 5. Nobody expects me to work after 5, and nobody's pinging me at all times of the day, so it's great. Like, we're all just like normal people here, and we all appreciate that we all have different commitments and things, and different responsibilities, so it's great from that perspective. The other good thing as well is I'm able to put my laptop off at the end of the day, and I don't stress about work. Like, there's nothing that can't like sort of wait till the next day sort of thing, so it's like nice. I'm not lying awake at night thinking about work. I can just switch off from it. I can take a holiday. As busy as it gets, it's difficult sometimes to hand things over. I can take a holiday without people constantly annoying me to jump on my computer, so it's great. So overall, I would say that I found this role within the contracts team to be very rewarding. You can see the outcomes of your efforts because you get something through and you read like the research proposal and things, and it's really rewarding. You see some random things, like sciencey things that you don't have a clue what they mean, but it's really interesting, and especially over the past year, being able to get involved with COVID related work has been great. So yeah, I would highly recommend the role, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, so thank you for listening.
Great, thank you very much, Annie, and very interesting to hear about your experiences working for the university, so thank you for that. I'm very pleased now to introduce Rachel Duffy, who is a newly qualified solicitor at the Scottish Social Services Council based in Dundee. Rachel.
Hi everybody, as Kerry said, my name's Rachel and I'm a newly qualified solicitor with the SSC. I just was going to give you a bit of background first about who the SSC are, because I know that some of you maybe aren't aware of what we do or who we are. So the SSC are the regulator for the social services workforce in Scotland, and our organisation was founded under the Regulation of Care Scotland Act 2001. This act just sets out some various statutory duties that we have, including our responsibility to register social workers, social care workers and early years workers in the various social services settings that they work in. We've also got a duty to promote high standards of conduct and practice among these workers, as well as in their education and training. And if there are concerns in terms of the way a worker behaves and their conduct falls below a certain standard, then we can step in and investigate those concerns. And there are various kind of routes that the concerns can come in from. These can be from employers of social service workers, members of the public, other public bodies, Police Scotland, care inspectorate, places like that, or workers can make a self-referral to us about their conduct. So just kind of moving on then to talk about the traineeship with the SSSC. I started there in August 2019, and I started along with 3 other trainees. The traineeship itself is split into 2 seats. So each trainee does 6 months within the Legal and Corporate Governance Department, and then we move on to do 18 months working with the Fitness to Practice Department. I had started my traineeship with the LCG department, and I found this really good because it gave me quite a broad overview and understanding as to how the various different departments within the organisation worked, and what their sort of responsibilities were and what they were doing kind of day to day. Legal and corporate governance itself was split into 3 different teams, and that comprised of corporate governance, information governance, and then the legal team itself. So as a trainee there, I had been responsible for helping to provide legal advice to the various different departments within the organisation. And you know, the kind of requests that came in were a bit weird and wonderful and very varied. Sometimes I could be, you know, given advice about the interpretation of legislation or new case law, and then the next day I could be given advice about, you know, data protection or freedom of information matters, things like that. When I first started with that department, my senior would kind of point me in the right direction as to where to look to find the answers to the kind of various legal problems that were coming my way. But you know, as I progressed during my time with that team, she gave me kind of more autonomy to deal with issues on my own, and you know, come up with my own conclusions to problems. All my work was obviously checked over by a senior before it was sent out to the various client departments as well. And we would normally have like a weekly catch up to discuss the work and what I had done well, or if there was any kind of areas for improvement too. When I was working in that department as well, I was also responsible for carrying out a lot of research tasks for my senior and the head of the department for the various pieces of work that they were involved in. And this itself, again, was a really good experience because it gave me a kind of understanding of what was going on within the organisation at a higher level. And I also spent a great deal of time working very closely with the information governance team, and that was one of kind of my favourite aspects of the seat with LCG. That kind of work involved assisting in reviewing data breach report forms and completing risk assessments, and I was also able to help out with a lot of subject access requests as well. And that kind of stood me in good stead for moving to work in the Fitness to Practice department, because a lot of the time those requests were coming in from workers who were under investigation. So it was giving me an insight into what was going on in Fitness to Practice, and also giving me experience in pulling together document bundles similar to what are used for Fitness to Practice hearings. So that again as well was really positive. Other kind of tasks that I was involved in with that team included like drafting and redrafting policies and procedures, and the privacy notices on our website, and that was really good as well because I was able to work closely with our comms team and appreciate more of the work that they do for the organisation as well. My senior also let me get involved in reviewing and agreeing data sharing agreements with other public bodies. And I was able to attend meetings with our council members who oversee the organisation, and they basically sign off on all the decisions that are made for the SSSC. And again, that was really beneficial because it gave me a kind of understanding as to the changes that were going on within the organisation, and the improvements that were being made as well. So after spending some time with legal and corporate governance, I moved to the Fitness to Practice department. The FTP department are responsible for investigating the concerns that are raised about workers in the sector. So when a referral comes in about a worker initially, it's assessed by our screening team, and then they will determine whether or not the behaviour is high risk or low risk. And cases are then allocated to the various investigators and solicitors within the department. As a trainee, my caseload was made up primarily of high risk referrals involving more serious behaviour. When these kind of referrals come in, what we normally do is carry out a risk assessment, and that's to decide whether or not the information we hold suggests that the worker presents a serious risk of harm. And if it is determined that there is a risk, we would then seek to impose a temporary order on the worker's registration with us. And that basically restricts or suspends their registration until such times as we've concluded our investigation. So I would regularly appear before fitness to practice panels as a trainee, just to take them through evidence bundles and make submissions about why the SYLA thought that imposing a temporary order was necessary on somebody's registration. After that kind of stage is dealt with, it's then just about investigating the concerns themselves. So that could involve gathering evidence from employers, contacting witnesses to take statements, writing out to medical practitioners if we have concerns about a worker's health, or getting in touch with Police Scotland or the Fiscal for information if we think a worker's been charged or convicted of a criminal offence. So a lot of my time is spent on the phone chasing up and requesting information, obviously to help us to progress our investigations. Similarly, I do spend quite a lot of time on the phone with workers who are subject to investigation, and that's just obviously providing them with updates on their case or their legal representatives if they have one as well. And once we've got to a stage where we've gathered all the required evidence, it was then my job to analyse all of this evidence and decide what weight it carries and if we have sufficient weight to establish the allegations against the worker. And that's on the balance of probabilities. So I would do that kind of work for my own cases, and I would also do it for investigators in my team who aren't legally qualified. If I had then made a determination that there was sufficient evidence for the allegations, it was then my job to take a view as to whether or not a worker's fitness to practice is impaired, and then decide what sanctions should be imposed on their registration. And sanctions kind of vary, so the least restrictive is a warning, and then the most serious is removal from our register. And as a trainee, all of my advice was always checked over by a senior, and it does still get checked now as well if I am suggesting that we should be imposing a sanction. So there is kind of a wee bit of comfort knowing that somebody's kind of looking over your work for you as well. If we are deciding to impose a sanction and a worker decides that they don't agree with it, they can request that the matter is heard before a fitness to practice panel, and that's for a formal impairment hearing. So at that point, it would basically be my job to go along to the hearing and present our case on behalf of the fitness to practice department. And that could often involve, leading witness evidence and making submissions about the evidence that we hold. And prior to the hearing, a lot of time would be spent, pulling together evidence bundles and contacting witnesses to make sure that they can attend the hearing as well. Workers are also entitled to attend hearings and they can be represented. So that can sometimes be quite fun because you never really know how things are going to pan out or what people are going to say. So that's always keeps you on your toes. But yeah, just generally with the traineeship, excuse me, I would say that I was always really well supported throughout. When I moved into the department initially, I did have an 8-week training plan to follow, and people were always kind of on hand for me to ask questions like as and when, or if I needed someone to read over my work, there was always someone to do that. And I would say, particularly well supported when it came to the hearings aspect of things, because I was really quite anxious about presenting hearings when I first started, because it wasn't really something that I was used to and I didn't really know what to expect. So my senior was really good and had organised a couple of mock run-throughs with some people in my team before I did my first real one, and that had kind of helped to build my confidence and make me realise, it's not actually so scary after all when you know kind of what you're doing and what to expect. And I wasn't pushed into it or anything like that. They obviously let me wait till I was ready to do it. And I had presented my first hearing about 4 months after I moved into fitness to practice. And that was kind of not long after everything had kicked off with COVID. So everything was all being done remotely. So I suppose that kind of calmed the nerves a wee bit as well, that people weren't sitting right in front of me when I was presenting the hearing. And I was supported as well with another mock hearing before I did my first impairment hearing. And again, my senior and the rest of the team were really great at supporting with that. So overall, generally, I would say my experience doing the traineeship with the SSC was hugely positive, and I feel that I did really gain so much from it. I was really fortunate as well to become close friends with the other 3 trainees who started with me at the same time, and it was good to have that kind of support network there to lean on when they were all going through the same sort of experience as well, and be able to chat to them about what was going on. And as an organisation as a whole, I would say that everybody's really supportive Most of my traineeship had been completed while I was at home, and I'd moved into fitness to practice about a month after everyone started home working. So there were a lot of people that I didn't really know well and hadn't met. But despite that, I could just pick up the phone and say, I've got this question, would you mind helping? And everybody would be really accommodating. Obviously, these are really positive things from the traineeship, and the work itself, although it can be really challenging, it is hugely rewarding, and I did genuinely love every minute of it. Just talking then a wee bit about my role at the moment as an NQ, I was quite fortunate that there were vacancies advertised at the time I was due to be qualifying, and I had interviewed for an NQ role and was thankfully successful in securing a job upon qualification in August this year. To be quite honest, my day-to-day is pretty much exactly the same as it was when I was a trainee. I'm still trusted to manage my own caseloads, conduct my own hearings, draft my own advice, that kind of thing. And my senior is always on hand to help out with any questions that I've got or any work that I'm not sure about. It's not like he's just kind of faded away into the background and expects me to go on with things that I'm qualified. Generally, is always there at the other end of the phone for a chat and to offer some reassurance. And that is much the same with everybody across the department. So yeah, very much enjoy my role, and hope to continue to develop my knowledge and whatnot. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. And thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Rachel. Sounds like a really interesting role. So thank you very much for giving us an overview. So I'm delighted now to introduce Laura Lee, who is Legal Counsel with the Scotch Whisky Association. Laura, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Kerry. Can you hear me okay? I'm delighted to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing a bit about working in the world of whisky. As Kerry's mentioned, my name's Laura. I'm legal counsel at the Scotch Whisky Association, and I work with a team of 4 other lawyers and 1 paralegal. Just the next slide, please. My experience working in-house is somewhat limited compared to the other speakers today. I've now been at the SWA for the grand total of around 3 months, but from what I've experienced so far, I think I've made the right choice. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about my background and how I ended up becoming an in-house lawyer, and then I'll go into a bit more detail about my role at the SWA and how we protect Scotch whisky. So just the next slide. So a little bit about my background. I was quite lucky. I knew I wanted to work in intellectual property quite early on in my studies. As I'll explain later, IP plays a key role while working at the SWA. It was actually a friend's dad who mentioned it as an area that would be interesting to work in. At the time, I didn't really know anything at all about IP, but it's led me down the path to where I am today. I had some great IP professors, including Bob Bone at the University of Texas at Austin during a year abroad, and Jane Cornwell, who was my dissertation supervisor during my final year at the University of Edinburgh. After graduating, I was able to get a role as an IP paralegal at Pinsent Masons. That exposed me to high value court of session actions, and I was able to also provide IP guidance to a range of startups around the UK through the firm's pro bono programme. That was really an exciting opportunity, and it allowed me to interact with a whole range of people, including someone who's starting a gin distillery, jewellery designers, and yeah, all sorts of weird and wonderful inventors. After that, I went to train at Kennedy's, which focuses on professional negligence and personal injury defender civil actions. And then I went on to work at DAC Beechcroft, which also focuses on defender professional negligence work. At that stage, I think I probably would have been pretty happy continuing down the path of professional negligence. It is a really interesting area of law, and I like the pace of litigation, but ultimately I think my heart was always in IP, and what's not to love about Scotch. So when the opportunity to join the SWA came up, I knew I had to throw my hat in the ring. Just the next slide, please. So before I move on to provide an overview of my current role, I thought it'd be good to provide a bit of background about the SWA and Scotch whisky. I'm sure you all know what Scotch is, however, you might not realise that it's protected under UK law under the Scotch Whisky Regulations 2009 and the product specification, which was previously known as technical file. Scotch whisky, of course, needs to be made in Scotland, and it's only made from cereals, water and yeast. It has to be distilled in a way so that it retains the aroma and flavours of the raw materials, and it needs to be matured in Scotland for a minimum of 3 years in oak casks. So that's sort of the basic rules in order to call a product Scotch whisky, but there are of course more. Next slide. So the Scotch Whisky Association plays a key role in the global success of Scotch. And next slide, please. The SWA is a trade association for the Scotch whisky industry. Our members represent around over 95% of Scotch whisky production. And our role really is to protect and promote Scotch whisky around the world. Today I'm going to focus on the role of the legal team, which works on protection of Scotch. So my role, along with a colleague, I'm responsible for our legal work in Europe, Africa and the Middle East, and the rest of the team deal with the rest of the world. We instruct lawyers all around the world, and we rely on their expertise and their knowledge of local systems. The popularity of Scotch means that there are many people who want to take advantage of its reputation by passing off products as Scotch whisky when it's not. This undermines consumer confidence in genuine brands and also threatens the reputation of Scotch whisky, which has been built up over hundreds of years. We therefore have a zero tolerance policy, and if we're alerted to a fake product, then we will take action to get it removed as soon as possible. To give you an idea of the volume of work that we do, at any given time, the team will typically have over 60 legal cases, over 400 ongoing trademark cases, and hundreds of investigations that may lead to further action. Our main goal is to have a product removed from sale as quickly as possible. So if we can't reach a settlement, then we will look to civil procedure, or sometimes we'll file criminal complaints if that's necessary. In addition to taking action in relation to fake products on sale, we also monitor trademarks around the world to prevent the registration of potentially misleading marks. So just for example, if a company in Russia tries to register a mark for the words Glasgow, Scot with tartan in the background, we would object to that if it's trying to be used on whisky produced in Russia instead of Scotland. But before I move on to some specific examples of products that we've taken action against in the past, I'd like to take a step back and have a look at the legal framework for Scotch whisky. There isn't enough time to go into this in detail, but I bring it up just because it is a crucial element of the job. I've listed some methods of protection on the slide. However, the most important one is probably geographical indications, or what's known as GIs. Just the next slide, please. Thanks. So you'll be familiar with other GIs like feta cheese, champagne, Parma ham, cognac. GIs are a special type of IP protection in international law, which recognises signs used on products which are specific, which have a specific quality, reputation, or other characteristic which derives from its geographic origin. Essentially, it protects the heritage and traditional methods of production. For Scotch, that means it protects the skills of those involved in the industry, such as the master blender, the stillman, the cooper. This is knowledge and skill that's been developed over many generations and passed on. So crucially, it provides a range of enforcement options to prevent the sale of fake products and enables the industry to control the quality of its product. That's why the SWA continues to pursue GI registration where possible, and Scotch whisky is registered as a GI in over 70 countries around the world. So now let's look at some specific examples of products we've taken action against in the past. The first one here is Redbird, which was sold in Spain. There are many ways to suggest that a product is Scotch when it isn't. This is probably the most obvious one, where they've directly misused the name Scotch whisky. Here, a criminal complaint was filed in Spain. The business's premises was raided by the civil guard and its stock was seized. And this was then followed up by a favourable decision from the regional and Supreme Court, and the defendant was then imprisoned. Another method of misleading consumers is through indications which are evocative of Scotland. So you can see there's a lot on that bottle there, such as the words Clan and Wallace, the bagpiper, the tartan background. You might not be able to see it clearly. It also says it's produced in Scotland. So proceedings were raised in South Africa in relation to this product, and the High Court issued an injunction preventing its sale. But that's not all we do. We also advise our member companies on compliance with the law. We deal with inquiries from the public and the media, and we also assist other teams within the SWA. All in all, it makes for a very rewarding job. So while every in-house role is different, I wanted to just end this presentation by mentioning a few things I've really enjoyed about moving from private practice to in-house. Firstly, for me, CPD now involves things like visiting a whisky distillery, and it's definitely been a good excuse to try a couple of new drams. I've also worked with some very talented people in private practice, but working in-house, your colleagues have a much broader range of knowledge and skills, so it's been really interesting to learn from them. Just for example, things to do with the HGV driver shortage, trying to make the industry more sustainable, and speaking with those who interact more with the UK and other governments. There also tends to be more of a work-life balance when you're working in-house, I've found, with less late nights, and there's no time recording as well, which has been a big bonus. And finally, I've not mentioned COVID during this, but I'm looking forward to when things are back to normal and there'll be opportunities to travel abroad and meet some of our talented lawyers. So that's everything from me. If you have any questions at all, please let me know, or if you'd like to get in contact, please do so too. And I'll pass you on to our next speaker.
Thank you, Laura. That was great and absolutely fascinating to hear about your role. Who would have thought there was so much goes into protecting whisky? So thank you very much for that. I am delighted to introduce our final speaker of the night, Kevin McKee, who is the Head of Legal Services at the City of Edinburgh Council. So Kevin, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Kerry. Can you hear me? Good, okay. Thank you. So as Kerry said, my role is Head of Legal Services at the Council. Firstly, a little bit about the Council. We are an organisation of some 18,000 employees, which is the largest employer in Edinburgh. We service over 500,000 residents in Edinburgh and visitors who come to the city. We have a budget of about £1 billion a year. And the Council undertakes a vast range of services, too many to list, but we are responsible for waste, roads, public safety, planning, social housing, social care, education, promoting the economy of the city and marketing it to visitors. We run schools, we run care homes, we run secure units, We have wedding venues, we have a number of cultural venues, and slightly more morbidly, we run mortuaries and graveyards. We also have a number of arm's length organisations running transport companies within the city, notably Lothian Buses and Edinburgh Trams. We have a leisure facilities arm's length organisation, Edinburgh Leisure, and we run the Edinburgh Conference Centre via an arm's length organisation as well. In terms of my own career, I started in private practice as a projects and infrastructure lawyer. I was seconded to the council for 6 months on a particular project, which was subsequently extended to a year. I then went back to private practice for a year, and following that, I joined the council permanently when an opportunity arose. I was pretty happy in private practice. My boss was nice, helped me to develop, had decent variety of work, but going to the council and secondment really opened my eyes to the variety of work that you can get in-house, and particularly at the council. And the fact that I've now been commuting from Glasgow to Edinburgh for 9 years is hopefully testament to that variety of work and the attractiveness of it. I started in the commercial team as a senior solicitor. I then took on the principal solicitor role in that team. I then became the legal manager, and after a recent reorganisation, that role changed to head of legal services. I also act as the deputy monitoring officer of the council, and I'll speak a little bit more about that shortly. My role in theory is probably supposed to be about 50% legal, 50% management, but on a good week, it's probably 75 legal, 25% management, just given how busy things are. The slide in front of you at the moment shows the structure. Oh, sorry, can I just go back one? Kerry, thank you. The slide in front of you gives the structure of the team. So currently we have 37 in the team. We also have a support team sitting behind that of 5 assistants. It's broken down into 5 teams, as you can see: commercial, real estate, comprising property and planning; litigation, which includes a specialist childcare unit; the employment team, and the licensing team. We currently have 3 trainees, including one who's seconded to the Lothian Pension Fund, which again is an associated body. And the Lothian Pension Fund gives a different type of seat. It's a more corporate seat, and it's a really worthwhile seat for trainees to do. We also have 3 former trainees in the team, and one who qualified for the Lothian Pension Fund. So I think on average, we've probably got about a 50% retention rate for trainees. And anyone who we haven't managed to retain has always gone on to a very good job within the profession. In terms of promotion up the ranks, it is a little bit of a flat structure, which can be unfortunate at times. In ordinary circumstances, in order to promote someone, we usually have to wait for an opening, so someone retiring or leaving, rather than in private practice where you can tap someone on the shoulder and promote them if they're performing well. But when an opportunity does arrive, we promote on merit, not on time served. So, for example, the kind of feeling is that a senior solicitor should be around about 4 or 5 years PQE. However, recently we promoted someone at 2 years PQE based on their high performance. So if we do have particular talent within the team and an opportunity arises, then we will reward that. Can I go to the next slide, please, Kerry? I've given a flavour of the day-to-day workload of each of the teams. Given that I'm on the graveyard shift, I won't go through all of these, but I'll maybe pick out 1 or 2. So for the commercial team, procurement is a big issue for the council, and it's something that I used to specialise in. It's in the news at the moment, particularly in relation to the PPE contracts awarded by the UK government and VIP lanes, etc. In council terms, what we have to do is ensure fair opportunities to win public contracts. And that can be really interesting work, particularly when it becomes contentious. And I do know that procurement lawyers are at a premium at the moment. So if anyone is struggling to know what to specialise in, I would certainly recommend having a look at that. The last aspect of the commercial team, which I've highlighted, is RIPSA, which stands for the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Scotland Act. That essentially governs undercover work by the council. If council officers want to go out and identify particular behaviour without wearing their council uniform, then they need to seek approval under that Act. Now, most of the time it's about things like blue badge misuse or dog fouling, so it's not really the stuff of spy thrillers, but nonetheless it's a heavily regulated part of legislation, and it can be interesting. The employment team provides policy advice, which is evolving all the time. They provide close support to high-risk cases, and what we mean by that are employees or former employees who may be taking action against the council, and they represent the council at the Employment Tribunal. They are very discreet and professional, of course, but you know that they do have all the gossip of what's actually going on in the organisation. The licensing team deal with a wide variety of stuff as well, from taxis, gambling, alcohol, parades, and more recently short-term lets, so primarily Airbnbs. I think a third of the properties on Airbnb in Scotland are in Edinburgh, and there's a concern at the impact that that's having on communities, particularly in the city centre. So all very contentious and lots of appeals. In terms of parades, I just want to clarify that the picture behind me is from my daughter's first day at school. I know that the red hand can be quite a loaded symbol, particularly in Glasgow, so nothing to see there. Next slide, please. Okay. Our real estate team, also known as the property and planning team, again deal with a plethora of areas. One which I would highlight is housing. It's a huge issue for Edinburgh as a growing city. Geographically, we are bound by the sea and the bypass. As everyone knows, property is expensive. It's a very buoyant market. So we have to think very carefully and tactically how we manage to house people in affordable homes, because we can't really have the city becoming wholly unaffordable. So we've tried to box cover, and we've set up, again, some arm's length organisations to acquire and then rent mid-market homes using fairly innovative funding mechanisms. Planning, as you would expect in Edinburgh, is a very contentious area. There are huge potential financial gains for developers, and they're therefore willing to fight, often tooth and nail, if they feel that planning permission is withheld unfairly. As you may be aware, the centre of Edinburgh and parts of the New Town are a World Heritage Site, so that just adds another layer of complexity for our planning lawyers. The litigation team do undertake commercial work, but the bulk of their work is social in nature. If you look at the list there, everything from ASBOs to child protection orders through to education appeals. An awful lot of work there to protect vulnerable people. And again, I would highlight the work of the childcare team, which can be very important, well, is very important and sensitive. A lot of the tales that underpin the work that they do are pretty harrowing, but they do make a real difference to vulnerable kids' lives and getting them to what is often a safer environment for them. And they act in a variety of legal forums, from the Sheriff Court to the Court of Session to various specialist tribunals. Kerry, can we jump over to the next one, please? The council also has an interest in various major projects. At the top left is the St James Centre, the new shopping centre within Edinburgh, although I note that I'm just noticing that that particular drawing doesn't have the Mr Whippy or dog turd, whichever way you want to look at it, hotel. So that's obviously an early drawing, but we have a £60 million interest in that project, which relates primarily to public realm works. The developer has various targets in relation to employability and increased domestic rates in order to get that injection of cash. We also have an interest, obviously, in the planning and roads aspects of that development and other developments, albeit that our role in that regard is quasi-judicial. So roads and planning sit separately from the council in a corporate sense. To the top right is the tram extension. So the trams, as you probably know, are going down to New Haven. We have a senior member of the legal team on secondment as the senior responsible officer to that project, which I think goes to show that in a big organisation there are opportunities for lawyers to spread their wings and get involved in other things. We have also a former member of the team as the head of procurement at the council, and there are other examples of people moving out with the legal team with their skill set and going on to do other things in the organisation. Bottom left is the proposed Edinburgh International Conference Centre Hotel. It will probably get a snappier name than that, but this is a hotel to be linked to our conference centre, which will be circa 362 bedrooms, making it the biggest in Edinburgh. So we're currently in negotiations for that between the landowner, ourselves, EICC as an arm's length organisation, and a well-known hotel brand. The bottom right, CGI, which you can hopefully just make out, is our long-term ICT partner, and we have a long-term deal with them, which was originally between 2015 and 2023. We signed a 6-year extension to that last year to the tune of £100 million, which we obviously negotiated over a period of time, and we do various things under that contract. A recent example this year was that we negotiated with them to provide 39,000 iPads and support services to school pupils throughout the city, which was worth about £18 million, and that negotiation was done by the in-house commercial team. If we can just flick on, other high-profile work that we're involved in. At the top left, we've got a crucial role to play in elections, which the council is responsible for managing, be they local or national elections. We provide advice on electoral law. We also usually contribute at a senior level to account management staff on the night. At the top right, we have the Winter Festival and Hogmanay, which are obviously well known, and we advise and negotiate on contracts and associated procurement processes for them. Bottom left, allied to the Winter Festival, we have the summer festivals in the city, where we negotiate contracts for venue use. And as I said before, we also own various cultural venues throughout the city, so we will negotiate contracts for them. Bottom right, again, on a slightly or a slightly lower tone, there are, in an organisation such as ours, sometimes some high-profile aspects of malpractice that may lead to criminal proceedings. There are sometimes instances of fraud. We've had instances of teachers who've had inappropriate relationships with pupils, and the legal team will quite often get involved in such investigations and liaising with Police Scotland as appropriate. We also are involved in high-profile civil litigation from time to time, or quite regularly actually. One from this year was an interesting case in relation to a church which had booked one of our cultural venues and had one of their keynote speakers, who was a pastor from the southern states in America, who had said various things which were considered by us to be offensive to the gay community, and we cancelled that particular event, which led to legal action. So that was a very interesting case in terms of the tension between freedom of expression and the protection of vulnerable groups. Can I just flick on to the next one? As I've alluded to before, we do get involved in quite a lot of different investigations, be they complex HR investigations or monitoring officer investigations. So my boss, the director, is the council's monitoring officer. I'm his deputy. That's a statutory role which is independent of the council, and we are required to investigate if there is maladministration, illegality or injustice. So essentially, if there are serious allegations, then we step in and investigate. And that can sometimes be quite uncomfortable because you can be investigating people more senior than you in the organisation. However, it's a role that we take seriously, and it's just part of the job. If we do find that there has been illegality, injustice or maladministration, then we would lay a report before the full council meeting of 63 elected members. Next, we have whistleblowing investigations. Oh, sorry, Kerry, I'm still on the slide before. Oh no, sorry, you're still on that slide, I beg your pardon. We have whistleblowing investigations. So the council has an independent whistleblowing provider, and it's up to them whether they consider allegations serious enough that they will want to investigate themselves. Sometimes they remit back allegations to be investigated in-house, and we will quite often either conduct those investigations or assist in them. We also have complex complaints that come into various departments of the council, and those departments may often want us to assist with that, just given our skill set for assessing evidence and eye for detail. In terms of inquiries, there are various inquiries that we are involved in or have recently been involved in. So you'll probably be aware of the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry. We are a participant in that inquiry. We obviously were a core participant to the Tram inquiry, which is over but which hasn't reported back yet. We sometimes may be involved with potential fatal accident inquiries. If someone is killed on our property or in one of our venues, so we would liaise with the Procurator Fiscal if that was the case. We also sometimes have miscellaneous investigations. So this year we contributed to an investigation in our education department into alleged racism in particular schools within Edinburgh. So our employment team contributed to that. Again, on a slightly more sinister note, we currently have an inquiry ongoing after a senior social work manager at the council was accused of some serious sexual offences, and he apparently killed himself last year, and that's led to a QC-led inquiry which is ongoing to understand whether the council or elements within the council may have been aware of what this manager is alleged to have been up to and why nothing was done about it. I appreciate that's quite heavy, so I won't dwell on that, but it's an interesting piece of work, and it's coming before, or due to come before council on the 28th of this month. So that's coming to a head and will be quite interesting to say the least. And allied to that, there's a wider cultural inquiry that's been sparked by that incident to look at the wider culture of the council. It remains to be seen what the chair of that inquiry comes up with. That's Suzanne Tanner QC. But again, speaking of my own personal experience of the council and within legal services, my experience of the council has been positive, but it will be interesting to see what comes out of that particular inquiry. I realise I'm probably going on a little bit here, so I might skip through the last few slides. If you could skip to the next one. Yeah, the legal framework. We do have a framework of external firms who help us, and we'll go to them usually if we are in need of a particular specialism which we don't have in-house, or if we need extra resource just because of capacity issues, or at the opposite end of particular specialism, if it's a repetitive routine aspect of work that can be done more cheaply outside rather than employing people with pension costs, etc., then we would sometimes package that up and put it outside. And we seek to drive value through that sometimes by having many competitions within the framework. And we do expect, in terms of added value, the firms to provide us with training and knowledge management, etc. If I can just go to the next one, please, Kerry. So clearly what we want is a high-performing, motivated team. I tried to do that by example. I know that filters down through the principal solicitors and the senior solicitors. In terms of the current COVID circumstances in our new trainees, we want to stay close to them. I'm acutely aware that it's very difficult for people starting in the profession to gain knowledge and perhaps to stay motivated when they might be feeling isolated. So we're really making an effort to go in and physically meet the trainees on a regular basis. I'll possibly skip over the internal recharge aspect of our work, although if anyone's got any questions on that. But unfortunately, unlike others on this call, we do have to record our time, which is slightly unfortunate and not very popular with clients, but it does kind of stop the floodgates from opening a bit. I think if we were free at the point of service, we would probably be flooded with requests, and quite a lot of people may come to you on the basis that they want to say they've run things past legal. So the internal recharge does act as a little bit of a barrier in the nicest possible way to coming to us. People do have to think whether they actually need legal input before coming to the team. The next 3 bullet points are probably self-explanatory. We have regular updates amongst the team, regular meetings, away days, etc., just to keep everyone informed and foster a collegiate environment. In terms of service, the first bullet point speaks for itself. We want high quality advice on time. The next 2 bullet points are probably a wee bit more interesting. I'm always keen to foster advice in relation to a risk-based analysis or an options appraisal for decision makers. We don't want to box decision makers in. We want to give them options. Sometimes they may be doing something that we consider high risk, but the prize for them may be worth it. So unless they're doing something unlawful or particularly crazy, it's very unlikely that we will say you should not do this. We will normally say, you know, this is high risk, this is a medium risk approach, this is a low risk approach, and back that up with options appraisal. Again, friendly client service and going the extra mile hopefully speaks for itself. It is amazing if you do a wee bit extra for clients just to make their lives that bit much easier, how much they will appreciate it. Proactive client engagements. Again, probably obvious, we try and stay close to our clients. It has been more difficult during COVID, but the more you stay close to clients, the more likely they are to find work for you and ask you to help, which is obviously all to the good. If you could move over. Again, just in terms of culture, we want it to be a pleasant, interesting place to work. Clearly want it to be a collegiate environment where people help each other. If one team's busier than another, then we expect within reason and in terms of specialism others to muck in to help. We should be able to trust people, given that we're all professionals. This has particularly come to the fore while people have been working from home. But it's about give and take. You know, there is a better work-life balance in-house, but there are times where at the council you do have to work a bit late if there's a particular project or a particular matter. But again, I trust people that if they want to start work a little bit later, or they've got something that means they need to get away for a little bit earlier, then it's all about give and take. If I know people that are going to go the extra mile, then I've got no hesitation and no problem with people getting that time back as and when suits them. In terms of development opportunities, we have people who are very ambitious and want to progress. We have some people who maybe at a stage in their lives or family life where they just want to come in and do their job and do it well and then go home. So we don't foist opportunities on people if they're quite happy doing what they're doing, but we do want to provide opportunities to those who are ambitious. And as I said before, we try to do that within the legal team, but there are potential opportunities out with it. I've probably spoken again about work-life balance. We definitely do try to foster that. I'm acutely aware that the younger generation of lawyers coming through seem to be less driven by status and money, which is a really good thing. And therefore it's even more important for us to attract and keep talent that we foster that work-life balance. And again, final bullet point, we do want to reward high performance. It is a meritocracy. People working hard and showing ambition, we will try to reward them as much as we can. Next slide, I think that's possibly, yes, sorry, that's me. Hopefully that was a useful run through of the team and my role in it. Appreciate the time of night it is, and I'm sorry if I've gone on a bit too long, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. That was really interesting. Really interesting to hear about the variety in the different departments as well. I think we all know that in-house is generally you'll get a bit more variety, but the amount of variety in each of those departments is really something. doesn't look like you have enough people for all the work you're doing. So thank you very much to all of our speakers this evening. Really excellent presentations, and I'm sure everyone has learned a lot. I appreciate we're slightly over time, but I am keen, if anyone has any questions, to give you time to ask those. So if anyone wants to pop questions into the chat, please feel free to do that now. So I see we have one question. So the first question is, how many hours per week do you all work?
I do 35 hours a week, just standard 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. Our lunchtime, take my lunch whenever I want, and the next one is negative sides of being an in-house lawyer. In my department, I would say the career progression is probably limited. You've kind of got to wait for a space for someone to go to move up. But yeah, that's the downside for me.
Thanks, Annie. Rachel?
I work the same amount of hours as well. I'm just 35 hours a week, and we have flexi time as well. So if I'm working a wee bit extra, you know, I can claim the time back, you know, whenever suits. So that's good as well. And I kind of agree with what Annie said as well in terms of career progression. It can be quite stagnant, and obviously depending on what if people are leaving, that depends on what opportunities are available. So sometimes, you know, there's not as much opportunity to move on in our department, but yeah, the job is worth it. So
I think I'm probably, also just sort of your standard 9 to 5 generally. I'll do a bit more just now just because there's so much to learn, and I'm quite early on in the job, so a lot of it is just reading up on the regulations and what's applicable, but I think, you know, after more time in the job, it's probably one where it is more of a standard 9 to 5. A good thing about, you know, the work that we do is that we can pick and choose what the priorities are in terms of cases. Before, when I was doing defender stuff, you know, you get stuff in from clients and then you immediately have to take action, whereas with what we're doing, we're seeing, you know, what is the biggest priority, what's a product that we need to, you know, take immediate action on, what can wait to later on in the month. In terms of the downside, honestly, I can't really think of many downsides of in-house work. It's all been very good so far. One downside of no time recording is sometimes it can be difficult to know when to stop and know, you know, have I done enough for the day? But that's something that just comes with experience.
Do you want me to go next?
Yes.
Yeah. I think I probably and work probably about 50 hours a week, if I'm honest. And that's just probably because I'm in a relatively senior position, and it's just generally busy. However, what I would say is, you know, I've got a young family. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I can kind of work around my family. I can usually stop work at 5 and then pick up a couple hours later on. And you know, I certainly wouldn't advocate you know, anyone else in the team doing 50 hours a week. There are plenty of people who work their contracted hours, and I don't have any issue with that. I can sometimes be my own worst enemy when it comes to that. But you know, it's just one of these things. It's just the way it is at times.
Thank you. We have another question. As a student, how would an individual go about finding what kind of organisation they might work with?
For me personally, I got some work experience during my diploma. I worked full time when I did my diploma in a legal advisor role, and from doing that, I learned what I did want to do and what I didn't want to do. So I worked for a charity, so it kind of made me think I do want to work in an organisation that makes a difference. And that sort of steered me towards why I work at the university. So I would say definitely go and get some experience before you settle into a traineeship. I kept not getting traineeships because people were saying to me, like, you don't want this traineeship, and they were being honest and they were right. I didn't want that traineeship. So eventually I managed to get the one that I wanted. So I would say definitely go out and do it and see what you want to do and what you don't.
Great. So another question, maybe Rachel, you would like to take this one. What is the application process like for in-house? Is it just a sort of standard procedure?
So in terms of our application process for the SSC, ours, as far as I can remember, for when I applied anyway, was just a kind of standard application form. You know, your kind of basic qualifications, work experience, things like that. And then I think there were a couple of questions about how you would fit in with the SSC in terms of their values. So there was like that kind of question on there as well. And then when you got to the kind of interview stage as well, we do a written assessment. So I know obviously some places will do, you know, like tests and things like that as part of the application. We do that as part of the interview stage. So a written assessment and then a formal kind of panel interview as well.
Thank you. Kevin, maybe a question for you. When do you think the best time is to move from private practice to in-house?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. You know what, I kind of moved in by accident. As I say, I went on secondment. I did feel that I think I was about 6 years qualified at the time. I felt I had a pretty good grounding in certain areas of law when I went, which stood me in good stead. I felt that I picked up pretty good habits from private practice. Not that you can't pick them up in-house, but certainly during my traineeship and qualified, I did work hard, and it was maybe, you know, it's nearly 20 years ago, so it was the kind of environment where sometimes you did have to work long hours, and that's what happened. So I feel that having had 5 or so post-qualified years under my belt, both in terms of experience and the ability to knuckle down when required, really helped me. But I don't think there's a right time or a wrong time. You know, we've got experience of people coming from private practice traineeships straight in and doing really well. You know, most of it's about learning on the job. I think most people will agree that about most jobs, and it's about attitude. If people have got the right attitude, they're willing to learn, they're a team player, then they'll thrive. So I'm not sure there is a right time, but for me personally, I felt that I, in retrospect, had a pretty good grounding and preparation for the move that I made.
Kevin, and I just have one more question here. I think this is directed at Laura. Did you find it difficult to move to the Scotch Whisky Association from a litigation background? The two are maybe not quite as different as you might expect, but they are quite different. Did you find that difficult when you were moving in-house?
So the job spec for joining the SWA actually was, first of all, an interest in IP, and then also some experience in litigation. So actually it's kind of helped with the role, because basically what we're doing is litigation, but just in other countries rather than in Scotland. So having that experience for a couple of years, it's given me a good sort of grounding, even though it's different systems in different countries. The general principles are still the same. And then I was quite lucky that I already had a bit of a background in IP as well, so that sort of played into it too. So yeah, the jumps been okay, but there's still obviously quite a lot to learn.
Thanks, Laura. Great, thank you all very much. I think that takes us to the end of our questions. So I just want to say thank you to all of you again for taking time out of your very busy days to come along and to present to everyone here tonight. I know certainly I found it really, really interesting, and I'm sure all of our attendees did as well. Attendees, thank you very much for coming along. Apologies, we've run over a little bit, but thank you for bearing with us. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to direct them to the panelists who have provided their their details. The recording will go onto the SYLA website, so you'll be able to look back at it as well, or you can get in touch with us at the SYLA website as well. If you go on there, you'll be able to email us and get in touch. So thank you all very much, and good night.